Hey y'all, it's your highness Princess Shay here. Welcome to the Change Your Dome. Make sure y'all subscribe, like, and comment to my YouTube channel. If you're on Instagram, make sure you share, tag me in it. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you retweet and tag us as the queen or whatever. Anyway, so I'm doing this video because I just want to talk about how a lot of the black leaders are either knowingly keeping us a victim or knowingly keeping us a victim, because Donald Trump literally signed the executive order that literally states African American people are equally right. And most of y'all did not read the executive order, which I know most of y'all just go by what the media tells y'all, and it had nothing to do with black people. It does nothing for black people. That's what the media told y'all, right? It didn't say anything about black people. It's what the media told y'all. But as we all know, being black people of the media does not like us. Why? Maybe because they're run by the Democrats. Who knows? But let's go to Donald Trump's executive order and read it. His police reform executive order. All right. So in President Trump's order, police reform order, he wrote and signed on June 16th. His state of what it starts off with, as soon as you read the executive order, I found this on CNN.com. Read Donald Trump's executive order for police reform. Easy. We all can do the research and the work, and we all can read, but most of us don't. So that's why people like me are here. Hello. So, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1, purpose. Purpose meaning, why are we doing this executive order? Okay? So purpose. As Americans, we believe that all persons are created equal and endowed with the inalienable rights to life and liberty. Inalienable? What does inalienable mean, Princess Shay? Let's look it up. Inalienable means inalienable. Inalienable rights are rights that government cannot violate under any circumstances. What? Inalienable rights are rights that government cannot violate under any circumstances. So let's go back to the order. As Americans, we believe that all persons are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights to life and liberty. Okay? A fundamental purpose of government is to secure these inalienable rights. Federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement officers place their lives at risk every day to ensure that these rights are preserved. Law enforcement officers provide the essential protection that all Americans require to raise their families and lead productive lives, which is true. You know, some things happen. Who we calling? We calling 911. I don't even know. I was in a hit and run. I had to call 911. I'm coming from a Stop the Violence protest, and a black man hit and runs my car, and white people chase him down. I got to call 911 to get the information and get help. So we need the police, period. The relationship between our fellow citizens and law enforcement officers is an important element in their ability to provide that protection. By working directly with their communities, law enforcement officers can help foster a safe environment where we all can prosper. Unfortunately, there have been instances in which some officers have misused their authority. challenging the trust of the American people with tragic consequences for individual victims, their communities, and our nation. All Americans are entitled to live with the confidence that the law enforcement officers and agencies in their communities will live up to our nation's founding ideals and will protect the rights of all persons. Particularly in African American communities, we must redouble our efforts as a nation to swiftly address instances of misconduct. What does redouble mean, Princess Shay? Redouble, what does that mean? Let's look it up. Redouble. Redouble means to make or become much greater, more intense, or more numerous. Redouble means to make or become much greater, more intense, or more numerous. Let's go back to the executive order. Particularly in African American communities, we must redouble, make great, make intense, and make more numerous our efforts as a nation to swiftly, quickly address instances of misconduct. That right there shows you how he is taking control and telling the police and the nation that African Americans have rights, equal rights that cannot be taken away. And they will have to work more swiftly, more intense, meaning that when misconduct happens, they go to jail, they get fired. They're not a police officer anymore. And do you not see these police officers who are racist quitting after this executive order? Why do you think that is? Because they now have to give our rights. Now it's rights for real. All that other stuff that they was used to for hundreds, 200, 300 years are out the window. In 3.5 years, out the window. Let's go back. The Constitution declares in its preamble that one of its primary purposes was to establish justice. Generations of Americans have marched, fought, bled, and died to safeguard the promise of our founding document and protect our shared, inalienable rights. Federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial leaders must act in furtherance of that legacy. Okay? So they have to work and act on making sure that we all have shared equal rights that the government cannot take away. Section 2 of the executive order. Certification and credentialing. Most of us may not even know that it only takes 2 months to become a police officer. Anyway, let's go back to the executive order. Certification and credentialing. A, state and local law enforcement agencies must constantly assess and improve their practices and policies to ensure transparent, safe, and accountable delivery of law enforcement services to their community. Say it again. State and local law enforcement agencies must constantly assess and improve their practices and policies to ensure transparent, safe, and accountable delivery of law enforcement services to their communities. Meaning they have to do training all the time, and they have to have training that's holding them accountable for safe, transparent delivery of law enforcement. Independent credentialing bodies can accelerate these assessments, enhance citizen confidence in law enforcement practices, and allow for the identification and correction of internal deficiencies before these deficiencies result in injury to the public or to law enforcement officers. B. The Attorney General shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, allocate Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only to those state and local law enforcement agencies that have sought or are in the process of seeking appropriate credentials from a reputable, independent credentialing body certified by the Attorney General. They're funding them to get better training. They're funding them, unlike Obama when we had to fund them. The government is funding them, but it has to make sure that it's the training that we help, that helps the safety of the public, African Americans. The Attorney General shall certify independent credentialing bodies that meet standards to be set by the Attorney General. Reputable independent credentialing bodies eligible for certification by the Attorney General should address certain topics in their reviews, such as policies and training regarding use of force and de-escalation techniques. Performance management tools such as early warning systems that help to identify officers who may require intervention. Look at that. All these KKK officers and all this stuff like that, they out the window. That's why they quit. Performance management tools such as early warning systems that help to identify officers who may require intervention. And best practices regarding community engagement. The Attorney General's standards for certification shall require independent credentialing bodies to, at a minimum, confirm that the state or local law enforcement agencies' use of force policies adhere to applicable federal, state, and local laws, and the state or local enforcement agency use of force policies prohibit the use of chokeholds. The state or local law enforcement agency's use of force policies prohibit the use of chokeholds, a physical maneuver that restricts an individual's ability to breathe for the purpose of incapacitation, except in those situations where the use of deadly force is allowed by law. That part right there, y'all, I ain't gonna hold y'all. I don't know what part where is use of deadly force is allowed. The only way I could think of is if somebody's trying to take the cop's gun and trying to shoot them or whatever. Even that is a little up in the air. But in any case, at least chokeholds are prohibited for the most part. The Attorney General shall engage with existing and prospective independent credentialing bodies to encourage them to offer a cost-effective, targeted credentialing process regarding appropriate use of force policies that law enforcement agencies of all sizes in urban and rural jurisdictions may access. Let's read it again. The Attorney General shall engage with existing and prospective independent credentialing bodies to encourage them to offer a cost-effective, targeted credentialing process regarding appropriate use of force policies that law enforcement agencies of all sizes in urban and rural jurisdictions may access. Appropriate use of force policies. I need to know what those policies are about. Like, what the hell is appropriate use of force? Chokehold is not appropriate, okay. Knee in the neck, I doubt that's appropriate. So we need to know, what are these appropriate use of force policies? What are they? We need to know. Section 3, Information sharing. The Attorney General shall create a database to coordinate the sharing of information between and among federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement agencies concerning instances of excessive use of force related to law enforcement matters, accounting for applicable privacy and due process rights. So we're going to have a database sharing information between federal, state, local, tribal, territorial law enforcement agencies concerning instances of police officers using excessive use of force related to law enforcement matters. A lot of the KKKs, a lot of these people, they get brainwashed and they get very, very excessive with the use of force. I don't know what is the use of force. Like, I need y'all to tell me in the comments. Y'all repost it. Y'all talk to me. What is an appropriate use of force as a police officer? Like, we got to put ourselves in police officers' shoes every day. People are calling us to domestic disputes. People are calling for robberies. People are calling for any and everything. We're not even going to talk about the white people just calling for nothing. But let's talk about the ones that actually have real problems when they pull up and it's a shootout or something like that. What is acceptable use of force? Let's go back. Part B. The database described in subsection A of this section shall include a mechanism to track as permissible terminations or decertifications of law enforcement officers, criminal convictions of law enforcement officers for on-duty conduct, and civil judgments against law enforcement officers for improper use of force. The database described in subsection A of this section shall account for instances where a law enforcement officer resigns or retires while under active investigation related to the use of force. The Attorney General shall take appropriate steps to ensure that the information in the database consists only of instances in which law enforcement officers were afforded fair process. So this database is supposed to help them to not hire, again, law enforcement officers with criminal convictions and civil judgments against them, criminal convictions of law enforcement officers for on-duty conduct. The Attorney General shall regularly and periodically make available to the public aggregated and anonymized data from the database described in Section A of this section as consistent with the applicable law. The Attorney General shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, allocate Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only to those law enforcement agencies that submit the information described in subsection B of this section. Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only allocated to those law enforcement agencies that submit the information described in subsection of this section. Section 4, mental health, homelessness, addiction. Since the mid-20th century, America has witnessed a reduction in targeted mental health treatment. Ineffective policies have left more individuals with mental health needs on our nation's street, which has expanded the responsibilities of law enforcement officers. As a society, we must take steps to safely and humanly care for those who suffer from mental illness and substance abuse in a manner that addresses such individuals' needs and the needs of their communities. It is the policy of the United States to promote the use of appropriate social services as the primary response to individuals who suffer from impaired mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Recognizing that because law enforcement officers often encounter such individuals suffering from these conditions in the course of their duties, all officers should be properly trained for such encounters. All officers should be properly trained for such encounters of mental health, addiction, and homelessness. A lot of people call the cops on mental health people because they had a mental breakdown, they're homeless, they're drug addiction, they another mental breakdown. And instead of calling the cops now, along with calling the cops, there will also be social workers that train and know how to help them, along with accreditation for the cops to learn how to talk to these people and not just shoot them. B, the Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services as appropriate, identify and develop opportunities to train law enforcement officers with respect to encounters with individuals suffering from impaired mental health, homelessness, and addiction. To increase the capacity of social workers working directly with law enforcement agencies, and to provide guidance regarding the development and implementation of corresponding programs, which involve social workers or other mental health professionals working alongside law enforcement officers so that they arrive and address situations together. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall prioritize resources as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to support such opportunities. C, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall survey community support models addressing mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Within 90 days of this order, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall summarize the results of the survey and report to the President through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy and Director of the Office of Management and Budget, which shall include specific recommendations regarding how appropriate funds can be relocated to support widespread adoption of successful models and recommendations for additional funding, if needed. D, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall, in coordination with the Attorney General and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, prioritize resources as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to implement community support models as recommended in the report described in Section C of this section. Section 5, legislation and grant programs. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Assistant to the President of Domestic Policy and the Director of the Management and Budget, shall develop and propose new legislation to the Congress that can be enacted to enhance the tools and resources available to improve law enforcement practices and build community engagement. B, the legislation described in subsection A of this section shall include recommendations to enhance current grant programs to improve law enforcement practices and build community engagement, including through 1, assisting state and local law enforcement agencies with implementing the credentialing process described in Section 2 of this order, the reporting described in Section 3 of this order, and the co-responder and community support models described in Section 4 of this order. 2, training and technical assistance required to adapt and implement improved use of force policies and procedures, including scenario-driven de-escalation techniques. Scenario-driven, so that means they're going to put them in a scenario and they're going to learn how to de-escalate it without having to shoot them, without fearing for their life. That's a good idea, because if you're already in a scenario, you ain't got nothing to fear for because you're already trained to know how to deal with it. Retention of high-performing law enforcement officers and recruitment of law enforcement officers who are likely to be high-performing. Confidential access to mental health services for law enforcement enforcers, and programs aimed at developing or improving relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve, including through community outreach and listening sessions, and supporting nonprofit organizations that focus on improving stress relationships between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. General provisions, Section 6, General provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head of, therefore, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary administration or legislative proposals. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any part against the United States, its department, agencies, or entities, its officer, employees, or agents, or any other person. So that is the whole Trump's executive police reform order. And as we can see, police officers are being fired. They're going to jail. Yes, they're getting out on bail, but that's what criminals, we have a bail system for that. They take 10%. We are able to get out on bail. Police officers are being charged. They have been being charged under Trump era. And we only can see what's going on from here. But everybody who has been screaming for the past 60-something years about police brutality and wanting equal rights is clearly here in this executive order that Trump signed, and it only took him one term to do. To me, Trump has exposed the Democrats of not wanting to really help Black people, African American people, or melanated people, because it only took them 3.5 years to sign an executive order, while President Obama told us it would take us a very long time because it's so deep of a problem that we have to fix. And in 3.5 years, Trump has got the police officers quitting their jobs, allowing for other good police officers to have jobs who care about the community, who care about changing lives, and who care about building the community up to get jobs. So thank you. Thank you, racist police officers, for quitting. Good. Thank you. Because we know who you are. We are aware, and we see you. We see you. God sees you, and there's a big change happening. And for all the Black leaders and Democrats who say nothing about this and who call Trump a racist, and all the white liberals who say nothing is in the president's executive order for Black people, you need to do some research. You need to get off CNN, MSNBC, MSNBC, Fox News, and all these other people, and then Power 105 and the Shade Room and all that stuff like that, and do your own research. Stop letting people tell you who to like and who not to like. Stop. Most of y'all didn't read the executive order because y'all don't like Trump, and they told y'all not to read it. And y'all should have read it because y'all would see that there's no reason for y'all out there still banking on police brutality out there still talk about Black Lives Matter when we got it in the executive order, and we need to start allowing ourselves to see ourselves now with rights, okay? And stop running out there trying to be dragged around like dogs, but stand up for our rights that we clearly have, and because of this executive order now. Let's elevate higher. Let's elevate higher. Let's think higher, okay? Peace and love to y'all. I'll have another video for y'all people who gonna tell me that Trump is a racist. It's coming. Because I does my research. I don't let people tell me what to do. I am not a sheep. Love y'all. Peace and love. Stay blessed. And make sure you read. Reading is fundamental. Knowledge is power. And applying that knowledge is what's going to take you far. Blessings.